Some movies are like anime, but you take it too serious. Why does John Wick work, but Fast and Furious does not? Is it first movie sets tone? Is it levels of consequences? How's it going, everyone? I'm back, and I need to talk about a pressing issue in the movie community. What's allowed to be realistic and what's not? Let's talk John Wick versus Fast and Furious. I've often wondered about people's perception of live action movies. It seems unless it's superhero related, people expect realism in everything. I'm specifically talking about action movies and a few sci fi movies. There's an expectation of realism because it's not a cartoon or superpowered related or a comedy. Examples of this would be Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, Fast and Furious, and John Wick. Those movies you expect realism because of the kick butt action and everything else. My question is what makes a movie acceptable at bending the rules or not? John Wick versus Fast and Furious. Now, both movies take a more, I guess you can say, Eastern media approach. At least that's how I look at it. Even though I know it's not only an Eastern media thing, um, but if you look at anime, you'll see almost all action packed anime starts off their characters at a certain level of power and then slowly scales them up in power as the show progresses. Look at Tokyo Ghoul. Spoilers here. Season 1, Kaneki is a coward who is riddled with fear, but by season 3, he's an epic powerhouse of a being who could take on the owl itself. I think that's the case with certain movies like Fast and Furious and John Wick. They both start their protagonists off doing smaller scale things in their respectable worlds, and then they progress. Fast and Furious is street racing with heists and taking down criminals. John Wick is an assassin taking on mob members. Now we have Fast and Furious crew saving the world from terrorists and people with super weapons, um, and super beings almost. And then we have John Wick who is taking on the entire assassin's world now, going against members of the table and every top-notch assassin there is. So, if both scale to ridiculous levels of power, why is one accepted by the public a lot more than the other? John Wick's world is praised, while the Fast and Furious franchise grows more and more hate. Now, I have a bias. I love the Fast and Furious movies, so I probably give it more mercy than I should, but that's what brought me to wanting to study and investigate this idea. And don't get me wrong, I also love the John Wick movies. I want to do a series of videos breaking down this question and deciphering the audience's impressions of these movies. And again, the question is if both scale to ridiculous power, why is one accepted and the other is not? First topic, the opening. I believe the opening to these worlds are very important. John Wick 1 introduces us to a retired assassin, some references of Baba Yaga, the boogeyman, with a reputation of being the best. Even though he is fighting level 1 bosses, if you will, throughout the movie, we have an understanding that not only has he been doing this for a while, but he's one of the best to ever do it. Many people know his name, and he makes mob bosses quiver in fear. You already expect him to be even better than you know, because you are aware of the iceberg um, under all of this, and that you've only scratched the surface of it all. With Fast and Furious's first movie, or even the first few movies, you're introduced to cops and robbers essentially. Dom gives you the impression that he's a legendary racer in the streets and a respectable leader of his family and crew. He never sees a pair of taillights and is strong enough to keep even the most hot headed people of his group in line. He faces off with level 1 bosses as well, and with the help of Brian gets out of the situation, although losing his cousin. Brian also seems to have a prevailing history before this movie, a cop that's trusted to go deep undercover to get the job done, able to blend in the crowd and adapt to unforeseen pressures, as seen in Too Fast, Too Furious. Both of these main characters start off with lower level issues while already having a reputation that precedes them. However, maybe not done as well as John Wick. John Wick movies use their extra characters and antagonists to actually build a fear of how powerful the protagonist is, while Fast and Furious showcase the main characters struggling to survive these level 1 bosses, even though there are also a few characters that build on the sort of legends that Brian and Dom are. And I say sort of because if I really look at it, Brian is a legendary cop, but his legend hasn't really begun yet. And Dom is a legendary racer, but his story also has barely begun. Again, referring to the first few movies. Maybe with John Wick, the audience knowing he is in fact an absolute legend before we ever seen him on screen is the reason we accept the impossible, because we don't know what his limit is. So I'm suggesting in this first video that perhaps the opening to your story or set of movies is the key to getting your audience to suspend belief for upcoming events. Maybe because we know Dom is a legend at racing and not MMA fighting or heavyweight lifting, we find it hard to believe he could take on The Rock or stump so hard that a bridge collapses. The streets always win. Meanwhile, John can be hit by a speeding car right in his leg and hip, yet get back up and kick the person with the same leg in under a few seconds. No one thinks twice. Now, I'm not knocking the fast movies. As a matter of fact, I defend these movies 9 out of every 10 crazy adventures they go on. But I will acknowledge that there has to be a proper way to go about making your audience see your world as you want them to. Next video, I will go over how I actually think Fast and Furious does something better than John Wick in suspending disbelief. Thank you for tuning in again. See you all soon. Have a blessed day.